Today, I want to talk to you about blending texts in service of an argument in an authentic literary synthesis essay. And we'll turn off the camera here. All right. So, again, the idea here with a synthesis is that we want to produce an argument and blend our, in this case, literary texts in service of our argument. So, it's not a book report, it is an argument that uses texts. So we'll take the hypothetical case of a coming of age unit in an American Lit course. All right. And here is our hypothetical task. This is typical of what many synthesis prompts look like. Take a position on the value of American coming of age literature to contemporary American youth. That's a complex question. And then, of course, we have to synthesize evidence from any number of works. In this case, let's just say 3 in support of our position. Now, remember that in the universe of claims, there are 4 types: claim of fact, claim of definition, claim of quality or value, and claim of policy. So we have to make sure that we are responding to the prompt here by offering a claim of value. All right. Now here, for example, would be a list of typical texts from a coming of age course. You may know all of these. You may know 1 or 2. It's a pretty decent list. Again, let's look at our task. We've got to take a position on the value of this genre to today's youth. And a value claim is a judgment. We've got to remember that. So as we think this through, we want to come up with something we feel comfortable arguing. Here are a couple of options. This first one now: while life presents different challenges to each demographic and every generation, it is the choices we make that help us overcome them. I like very much, but I'm not sure that's a value claim. It's kind of a claim of fact, isn't it? So I'm going to work on this a little bit more. And here's another option. While it may seem that life is more difficult today than ever, remember, I've got to speak to today's youth. Coming of age stories offer helpful insight. There's my evaluation. There's my value judgment. Helpful insight into the one thing we can all control: the choices we make. I like this one better as a central claim, so I'm going to open with that. Now, there are 2 different approaches I can use to organize my synthesis. And we're going to look at each of those next. First, I'm going to pull a list of texts. There were, remember, 8 or 9 initially. Now I'm down to 6 that I know off the top of my head. Maybe these are the 6 I read, if there was a list of choices. Either way, these are texts in which characters face difficult choices. So I've got some evidence to work with. How do I organize? Well, if I'm taking what I think is the easier path, and if you're a fan of the 5-paragraph essay, this just almost seems like an invitation to do this. And I'm going to ask which of these, I've got to use 3, right? So which of these 3 texts actually support my claim? And I'm going to come up with these 3. Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, and Huck Finn each offer stories in which characters have difficult choices to make. So I can build a body paragraph around each one. It can work, but that's not really synthesizing the texts in service of my argument. It's doing a separate little treatment of each text. I'm not really blending them. I would call this a fruit salad. It's good, but I can still see the chunks of blueberry and strawberry and raspberry. A true synthesis requires me to turn on the blender. So how do I do that? Well, if you organize instead of by sources, by concept, you're going to pull ideas, mini arguments from the larger body of texts. What does that look like? I've got to come up with, instead of asking which texts support my claim, which reasons can I offer in support of my claim? And then I'm going to build my line of reasoning as a series of little baby arguments. Here are 3 reasons that I can come up with from reading all of these texts. 1, difficult decisions require courage. Notice that's a claim. I've got to still prove that. 2, while we may have help, we ultimately have to decide for ourselves. That's my second reason. It's a claim. I still have to come up with evidence for that. And considering others first usually results in the best choices. I've got 3 reasons now. And here's the nice thing. I might come up with 4 or 5 more if I want to. The number of body paragraphs is a rhetorical choice. If I build them around the text, I'm going to automatically revert to this 5-paragraph formula and 3 paragraphs in the middle. But if I'm building by concepts, I might offer just 2 reasons in support of my central claim. Remember, a line of reasoning is exactly that. A line is more than 1. So I might just offer 2 reasons, right? Now we're stretching this a little. Again, we have our central claim at the top. And the idea that difficult decisions require courage, here's my first little baby argument in my line of reasoning, my two reasons in support of this claim. Notice I've got 4 different texts blended into these 2 reasons, and this, my friends, is a smoothie. I've turned on the blender. Difficult decisions do require courage. Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird has several difficult decisions to make, including, of course, befriending the frightening Boo Radley. And in Huckleberry Finn, of course, the courage Huck has to display to take on everything he's been taught at age 14 is it's staggering. In support of my second reason, that while we may have help, we ultimately have to decide for ourselves, I can cite Esperanza moving with her family, and having all kinds of support from her family, but ultimately deciding that the whole series of vignettes is about different decisions she has to make for herself. In Little Women, you might remember that the March sisters, their mother on Christmas morning, this is just one example, sort of lobbies them to give up their breakfast to the poor Hummel family. Ultimately, they have to make that decision for themselves. So I am blending texts in service of an argument. And of course, in Little Women, that decision, that sacrifice comes back tenfold. We know that. But there we go. Now I have texts serving my line of reasoning. And if I want to, I can even add that third reason back in and bring in a new text, Lord of the Flies, to support the idea that considering others first usually results in the best choices. Of course, in Lord of the Flies, all the boys have to choose at one point between Ralph and Jack. And when they act in their self-interest, it doesn't go very well for them. So that supports this reason. And then, of course, in the most powerful moment in all of American literature, Huck Finn decides to tear up the letter, makes the decision that he's willing to go to hell so that he can take care of his friend Jim. And of course, he then reports that he feels cleaned of sin for the first time in his life. We all know how that goes. So now I have turned on the blender and I'm using the text in service of my own argument. And now what do? Well, to conclude, I can go back to that first slide that had the two options for my thesis, and I can offer a concluding claim that is not redundant. It's from the same stance as my central claim, but it's a different stasis category. Now we're moving from a value claim to a claim of fact. It's a little broader. While life presents different challenges to each demographic and every generation, it is the choices we make that help us overcome them. I've got a nicely blended synthesis essay. So remember, when we organize by sources, I love fruit salads, by the way. A really good fruit salad, I'd call that a B probably. But when you turn on the blender and you give me a really well-made smoothie, that's going to be an A every time. Okay, so that is my advice on synthesis writing and organizing by concepts instead of sources. I hope you found that helpful. Thanks for being with me today.